we have with us David Adler. Now, David, great to have you here on the show.
Thank you, Ryan.
Very important article you had in The Spectator this week, in which you have come out of the closet, as it were, and said how you believe the Jewish community should be approaching the Indigenous Voice to Parliament referendum later this year. We've already heard from numerous Jewish organisations saying, vote yes, it's the right thing to do, you know, blah, blah, blah. You have a very different opinion. Tell us why.
Rowan, during the last week or so, the Prime Minister has latched on to a false concept that the Jewish community is universally supporting the voice and is spruiking it in meetings and on the media, etc. It is not true. But because the Prime Minister jumped into it, we had to have a look at an analysis of it from a Jewish perspective. And the messages, although they're from a Jewish perspective, they have broad application. And there are three major reasons why we are saying that the correct thing to do is to vote no. The first reason is a basic religious concept, which is that all people are made in the image of God. And whether you're religious or not, we learn out from that a message of equality, that all people should be treated equally. If you put into your constitution that on a race-based mechanism that some people will be treated differently to others, that offends the principle of equality. I'm advised by some learned Christians, it's also in Christianity, so the Voice proposal would offend an important Judeo-Christian ethic. That's the first set of reasons. The second one is the history of the Jewish people. And perhaps more so than any other people, we have lived through many societies through history that have had racial or ethnic divisions, from ancient times of ancient Egypt and the Roman Empire through to the modern incarnations like the former Soviet Union or, worst of all, the Nazis. All had systems of racial division. You can go throughout history, there is not a single example where these sort of ethnic or racial divisions are commendable, where they've done good for a society. Not one. So we think there's a history lesson. And the third is a very specific political one. And it's been discussed here in general terms that some extremist, radical, inner-city Aboriginal activists seem to be very influential. And we've seen that infiltrate into foreign policy, that we have seen them take a hostile to Israel perspective. So if you looked at the Invasion Day so-called protests this year, you won't see an Australian flag, you'll see two other flags, the Aboriginal flag and the flag of Palestine.
Yeah. We've got some photos of that we'll put up in a sec, but you carry on.
This is not just theory. When we had the Sydney Festival last year, there was a boycott arranged because one of the acts attracted a small sponsorship from Israel. And unfortunately, the inner city extremists got onto the Aboriginal artists and the bulk of them joined the protest. So there is a real risk that if you create a political leverage, a special mechanism to advise Parliament, to advise the executive government without restrictions, given the track record, we think it's a real risk, and it's been demonstrated as a risk, that they could well advise government to take a more hostile to Israel foreign policy.
Well, we have seen this reported, this Aboriginal solidarity with Palestine, as you mentioned, Invasion Day protests with the Palestinian flag included. But yet we've had the Jewish community, or at least their community leaders, say that we're backing the Voice, along with the AFL and the big corporates. So why is that? Why are these community leaders taking a position that is, and at the very least, divisive? Why not just stay out of it?
We would have preferred that they stay out of it, that it's not primarily a Jewish issue. But I'm hypothesising there are actually two reasons. One is that the Jewish community has not been immune to the long march of the left through the institutions.
We've got just show that here are these images there.
Yeah,
so you've got the Aboriginal flag and the Palestinian flag. Now, obviously, not all Indigenous organisations support Palestine and vice versa, but there does seem to be here we see it again, the solidarity there, and that's what you're warning is something that you can't ignore.
It is a risk. But to continue with Rita's question, so maybe some of them are taken up in this woke movement. We've seen them get involved with climate change and gender issues, and along comes another one called The Voice. But I think there's a more controversial reason as well, and it relates to the principle of follow the money. That if you are involved with an organisation that wants government grants, a community organisation, or if you're involved with a professional firm or business that wants government contracts, then endearing yourself to the Labor Party at the moment might be a strategy that you'd consider. And at least there's a conflict of interest there for those people that needs to be declared and hasn't been declared yet. So perhaps that's an explanation. Certainly from a Jewish values point of view, it is wrong. We're all for helping disadvantaged people. Jews have a great record in combating racial inequality, played a major role in the black liberation movements, ending apartheid, marching alongside Martin Luther King in the US. That's part of our culture as well. But creating this particular political mechanism is not about equality. It's not a campaign for equal rights, it's a campaign for different rights.
Special rights, privilege.
And that's wrong.
That's the point I wanted to pick you up on. I mean, you've given three reasons, and your article in The Spectator was brilliant, by the way.
Thank you,
but
Jane.
discounting the historic and the political issue, the first point you made was the fundamental part of Judaism is everyone's made in the image of God. For Christians as well, Paul says there's neither Greek nor Jew, everyone's equal. How is it that Jewish people have seemingly just thrown that principle to the gutter in support of The Voice? Why so quick to jettison that fundamental principle?
Well, it's actually one of the reasons our organisation was formed, the Australian Jewish Association, because we've seen many examples where some organisations, as part of their shift to the left, has also been a shift away from Jewish values. And the reaction we've had from the community has been extraordinary. When you're on social media, your computer, your phone, you decide what sort of information you want, which organisation you link with. AJA has become by far the largest in Australia on social media and community engagement. So I think we have another example here of certain elites which have emerged, which have a philosophy or an interest which may not align with a substantial proportion of the community. The article in The Spectator that you refer to was picked up during the last week by a WhatsApp group of our rabbis. It was given commendations, it was quoted, it's being used by those who represent the Jewish values and religious principles.
Something quickly, because a lot of these community groups, and it's not restricted to the Jewish community, there's no election. It's not like, they are presenting the mainstream views of that particular community, are they? How do these community groups or leaders emerge?
Look, it's very rare that it's contested,
Yeah.
that a position is contested in community organisations, and it's historical. There has been no poll done of the Jewish community in this country. The truth is that no one knows.
Yeah.
True. Exactly. And like all these things, it's down to the individual to decide. But David Adler, thank you so much for pointing out those three reasons, which are fascinating and all very different, about why you believe the Jewish community should be voting no to The Voice, particularly the number two, the historical reason, is fascinating. David Adler, thanks so much for coming on Outsiders.